Years ago, I shot 10 bags of heroin every day. Heroin is a beast, and that beast has infiltrated every town and city in America. In 2016, 64,000 Americans died of an accidental overdose of opioids. I hope that the stories we bring you on this show save lives in 2018. I'm Richie Farrell. I'm a heroin addict. Okay, here we go. Want to apologize. We had a little technical difficulties that we straightened out. We have a wonderful guest here that I'll talk about in a minute. I just want to wish everybody a happy new year. This is our first show of 2018. And for those who are viewing for the first time who don't know me, I'm a recovering junkie with over 3 decades. Back in 2009, I wrote a book called What's Left of Us. It was about my 7 days in detox, court-ordered detox. Channing Tatum was going to play me. He had picked it up. He was going to make a movie and play me. I didn't really like that because I'm a lot better looking than Channing Tatum. No, I'm kidding. But and what happened is that in 2009, there was no heroin epidemic. And once, you know, I spent some time in Hollywood, did some writing, worked on the Fighter movie, and then all of a sudden, the epidemic. People, my friends' kids were dying, and I was like, what's going on? And the publisher of my book wanted me to write a chapter to update it, and went back and forth, and it was going to be 3 years. I said, wait a minute, 3 years to get this back in the chute? The kids are dying. Like, you know, back then it was like 100 a day. So my agent got the revision of rights, and I restructured the book and brought it out under I Am a Heroin Addict. It's right now it's, you know, number 4, number 5 all the time as far as recovery. I wish I could give it away. But what my mission is here with I Am a Heroin Addict, the TV show, is about 4 or 5 months ago, I was in a restaurant with my wife and my son, who was 12 years old, and I look over at the table, and there was this beautiful family sitting at High Tops with 3 kids, teenagers, and the mother and father, and all of them were on the phone. And I said to myself, that's what's happened to our society. We're locked to this phone. I see it every day. My son, he loves it. Me, I do the same thing. I'm guilty. But I said, hey, I was a junkie. I knew what it was to drive down Adams Street in Lowell, grab a bag, drive to Chelmsford Street, go to the Burger King, lock the door, and sit in the toilet and take the water to shoot up. And I knew how I felt after, and I knew I wanted to get straight. And I know junkies today, how bad they want to get straight, addicts. And I said, what if I could use that concept and I could live stream a show into struggling addicts' cell phones, that they could sit there while they were sick, while they were contemplating getting out? Because what people don't know, and I'm sure my guest will attest to this, is after a while, you're not getting high anymore. You're just shooting a bag of dope just to maintain and feel normal. So after that, you'd feel horrible, and you'd be filled with guilt and anxiety. And I'm saying, what if I can create a show that in a year's time, I can be all over the United States, and I can live stream to an addict, that they can sit there, they can get help, they can see other addicts like my guest here who have overcome incredible odds. So that's what we hope to do. What we hope to do is in every state get a coordinator for I Am a Heroin Addict. I have a young man, Tyler Coughlin, out in Washington, who we're talking to, who at 20 years old ran for selectman in his town and won. Of course, things happened. He's now clean. He's very interested. And my friend, this guest I'm going to trap her into the Maryland connection here. So, and my goal is to get someone in every state so that by the end of this year, we're in every state streaming in addicts' phones to help them. Now, I met this next young lady in Hagerstown, Maryland. I was doing work down there on the seminars I was conducting and called Healing Through Writing that later changed to a Life Worth Saving seminars. And basically, I used my writing experience when I was a professor at UMass Lowell, my screenwriting, and the books that I've read. I put together a kind of a program that I would go in, I would teach it, and I would get these, in this particular case, all females, to write stories about their addiction and their past. I strongly believe that there's a big problem in the mental stuff. It's getting over the physical is good, but the mental stuff, the guilt and the shame of the things that I had to do and other junkies have to do to chase their addiction. I did just horrible things. So I believe if we can write about it, they'll set free. So I was there and I met this young lady who was just excelled at everything. We have a friend that we're going to talk about, and we're going to roll in a little clip that I got permission to use of her daughter and a young friend of ours who didn't make it. She died. But before further ado, let me introduce my friend Brittany Castleman from Baltimore, Maryland. Britt, how you doing today?
Hi, Richie. How are ya?
I'm doing fantastic, actually. So I had, in the advertising, I had talked about that you were homeless in Baltimore, you had lost your kids, and that you were like 4 or 5 years on Suboxone and methadone, right?
Exactly.
So tell me a
Yep.
little bit about those days. I don't want to hear war stories. Just tell me about, the things you went through and back in Baltimore.
Right. I'm not going to tell you war stories, but I can tell you that in 2015, I lost my career. I worked for the Washington Post for 4 years, and Jeff Bezos, the owner of Amazon, bought over the Washington Post, and I lost my job because he laid off 26 people. So that, in combination with my grandfather passing, I was on methadone at the time. I had relapsed. And it just, they say when you relapse after being clean, it it spirals so quickly, and that's what happened to me. Within 3 months of losing my job and relapsing, I was homeless in Baltimore City, sleeping in a tent, panhandling, doing what I had to do to stay well. And it wasn't even really staying well because I was on methadone, but it was panhandling and just chasing a drug, any drug I could get my hands on, any kind of substance just to put me out of my mind. And
So,
that's just
so,
my addictive behavior.
so
Behavior.
that's the thing that I like to talk about because I'm a big fan. We've talked about this before. I'm a big fan. I know about harm reduction, and I completely understand it. Harm reduction is the buzz phrase to save an addict's life for another day. And we know
Right.
we're gonna show a clip here of our friend Liz Thompson here in a second. We know what that is. We all want an addict to stay alive. We also know that in 2016, the CDC reported 64,700 people died of an overdose. And a lot of them were on Suboxone, or were prescribed Suboxone or on methadone. So, you have, talk a little bit, you have 15 months now clean. Are you on Suboxone or on methadone?
No, I tapered off of methadone in 2016 when I got clean. I was on it for 5 years prior, so I just felt the need to taper off, and I'm staying clean without Suboxone or methadone.
And does that make you, I mean, how does that feel? What's the difference between being clean on Suboxone and on, being abstinent?
Right. Well, I'm not going to down Suboxone and methadone because I do know a lot of people that are on it and are doing well. But for me, it felt like I was always trapped down. That's what kept me homeless so long was being on methadone and having to sleep outside of the clinic and be close so I could get my next dose the next day. And it just feels so good now to be able to wake up in the morning and not have to go to a clinic or worry about how I'm going to what I'm going to do to get methadone the next day.
Yeah.
Especially, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm with you. There's one thing that I would never do. I never guilt or shame a brother or sister addict like myself who is doing the best they can. You know, chasing heroin is a lot different than going to a clinic or going to a doctor, Suboxone doctor. So I'm all for harm reduction. I would never guilt or shame everybody. My big thing is that I think we have to look at, and I'm not a believe me, I'm not an expert. I'm a writer, and and I'm very limited in my knowledge. I know what I know, and that's it. But I do know is that harm reduction, yes. However, we have to start going towards harm elimination. If we're going to look for things, we have to start looking at harm elimination. Like, is there a process that we start weaning off, like you said? Because I know myself, Brett, is that I wouldn't have won the DuPont Columbia. I wouldn't be sitting here. I wouldn't be doing if I was still on methadone. Like our friends that I ran with on the street are still showing
Right.
up in the morning. I wouldn't have been there. So my thing is quality life. If we can, like you, have a quality life now. Now, what I want to do for a second is we're going to try here in a few minutes to roll in a clip on Liz Thompson. And we want to talk about a little bit about her life and what a beautiful person she was. You knew her from the W House, or were you in detox with her? How did you know Liz?
I knew her from the W house.
Yeah, I mean, she was a beautiful person. I worked with her on her story. Her mother's beautiful, and if I can keep her memory alive, I showed this clip coming up here that we're going to try in about 20 seconds to roll in, and then we're going to talk, about Liz and how we can use her life to as a positive thing, the life that she lived. We're going to give it a shot right here. So bear with me while we roll in this short clip. You might have seen it.
Ready? Yeah. We make a wish. Ready? And then. Do it again. Come here. We make a wish. Look at it all over you. You want to do that one? And mommy hold. Come here. Come here. We make a wish. No. Oh yeah.
Okay, so that whenever I show that, when I show that in Littleton, Massachusetts last week to a high school of 440 people, the girls in the front were crying. I mean, there's a beautiful. I forget the little girl's name. What's her name? Do you remember?
Adeline.
Adeline. A beautiful little girl that'll grow up and never know her mother, and we know her father. Her father hung himself, so she won't have a father either. And what I'd like to talk about is how we made it out. And what are some of the things that you think are stopping struggling addicts like yourself and Liz from getting over that hump where you are? What do you think, Brett?
I think a big reason is because they hold resentments and things that we've done in the past and, losing custody and, just we hold on to stuff and don't let the resentments and things that are bothering us go. So I think that's a big reason.
So how did what are some of what are some of the things that you did to? I mean, like for example, I know myself. For me, it was working out all the time in education. Working out, education, working out, and it kind of changed my life. The two of them, that I still do today. But for you, how did it? What are the tricks that you use to overcome?
I I feel like with me, it's more putting my mind into recovery and working. And I do have people in a network that I tell my resentments and my past and my story and share things that I won't share with anyone else to get it off of my chest. I read Jesus Calling every day and Just for Today, and pretty much I feel like when I get out of the recovery network and tell myself I'm not a recovering addict, that's when I start slipping up, and that's when I'm thinking, okay, I can use one more time, or I just feel like if my recovery network and the people around me are supportive and have my best interest at heart, that I'll continue to strive and do good and stay clean.
And in that recovery network that you've surrounded yourself, are they people who have been through similar stuff like you have been through, or are they all different? Talk to me about that recovery, because that's what I did.
It's really both. It's people that have, been homeless in the city, or, have lost custody of their children, or, people that are on methadone maintenance and Suboxone maintenance right now. And just I can relate to people in recovery so much more than I can my family. I relate to people in recovery more than I do with my family, because I have these ever since I was younger. I have these, addict thoughts and addict behavior, and um, it's really great having a support network. Even girls that went to the W House with me, we're just all very close still and keep in contact, and so
Yeah, yeah. I stay in touch with several of them. They're a great group of girls, and of women. I'm sorry, girls. I'm old, so I say girls. But
women. Yep.
let's talk about being a mom, because I know that 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 I know personally a good friend of mine, when I was getting straight, lost her kids and what that did to her, and she did anything she had to do to get back that, to get visitation, first of all. So
Right.
as a mom who has overcome so much, you have three children, right? Three
Yep.
kids, you said.
Yep.
So
Yes.
talk a little bit about what was that like when when your children were ripped away from you?
Well, in 2011 is when I lost custody of my now 9 and 10-year-old. And I mean, that was hard. That's probably I'm not blaming my addiction on anything, but that was a big reason why I did, relapse and stay out. And um, I got pregnant with she's now 5, and I had her in 2012. And then when I relapsed in 2015, my parents got custody of her end of 2016. So it's when I was getting clean that they allowed me to start seeing her, and because they knew I was in treatment and getting better. And but I can tell you, it's having children and going through it. Everyone's always thinking, what a deadbeat, or you don't care about your children. They should be the reason to stay clean and not use drugs. And it's not that easy for an addict. You start off, and then when you have different emotions, you relapse, and then it's hard to get back on. And when you lose your children, it's the hardest thing in life.
So, so if you were to say, we have a question here in a minute I want to bring up, but if there's a mom out there that's watching this show and looking at you and sees what you have accomplished and sees how far you went to the bottom, which we all go, right? Your story is very
Right.
similar to Liz's, and we're all in the same. We go to we crash, and but if there's a mom out there that either watching this live or will watch it next week on the YouTube channel, that's lost her kids, what's some of the advice that you could give her? Because I'm sure that, like you were just talking, that she's devastated, right? And people are calling her a scumbag, a junkie, and all that stuff. So she's got to go with everybody that, from her loved one or family, that thinks she's a scum, to our kids, to this habit, right? So what advice, what would be the first thing you could say that would break through to help that that mom that's watching this?
Of course, what anyone would say is get clean and stay clean, because I've known people that I went to rehab with and treatment, and they have children that are 15 to 25 years old and they haven't spoken to them in years. But when you get clean and you do the right thing and show people that you're working towards bettering your life, your children will come back in your life. I don't care if they're mad at you and you haven't spoken to them in 10 years. Your children will come back into your life. And if they're younger, you start with visitation slow, and it's probably going to be hard, but in recovery, there's a lot that's hard, and you just have to work through it and you'll have your children back.
Okay, so that leads into a great question here. Tyler Coughlin from the West Coast just wrote, what's the best part about being clean?
That's probably my best part, is being active in my children's life, dropping them off at school and going to school plays and just being active in their life.
So just being able for a mom to be able to do how about to add to Tyler's question, what about the health? How do you feel? You know,
I feel great. I
Did-
feel great not having to wake up and, for 5 years prior, I was on methadone. So when I woke up, I was feeling draggy, and until I got my medicine, I was just out there. But now I wake up, I have coffee, my bones don't ache. I feel great being clean.
the fire and I'll never forget people and I kicked methadone, and I would rather kick heroin 5 or 6 times than kick methadone once. So when you talk about your joints, it's like people don't they people don't get it, that are on it. They think that, but they don't understand. To get off it, it's going to be, it's like the narrow, the in your bones is on fire, as you know. So
Yep.
some of the big things are your health, right? And what are some of the other small things that you didn't get when you were out there chasing the addiction? Besides your kids, was there, what about your family?
Food, yeah. I mean, it's my whole family. Everyone cut off communication with me. Food, panhandling and going to soup kitchens, and that's why I've gained so much weight being in recovery, because you lose out on food and you lose out on sleep and clothes and um, just all the little things, water, a house, a bed. It's just you lose out on a lot when you're using.
So the thing that, what would be the, and again, I don't mean to keep on, but so what, I mean, think back to when we were like, like this, you're a junkie, no good, you look horrible, you feel horrible, right? And you're there, and you've just got high, but you're not high. You know that feeling, right?
Hmm.
You're just not sick anymore. You're normal, right? So you're feeling that, and you haven't seen your kids. You're nobody. Your mother won't talk to you. Nobody. The last person in the world to let me down was when my mother said, "I'm done. You either leave or I'm calling the police." I knew. I was just going to swear there, Brett. I knew that I was in trouble, and so, let's try and break it down, because I remember when I worked for a guy, Scott Silver, who was a A-list screenwriter, who was like, when I worked on The Fighter, he said to me, if I told you everything you have to know right now, because I came from writing books, and articles, he said, if I told you everything you had to know right now, you'd say to hell with this. So I kind of bring it to the same, about being a screenwriter, if he told me everything. So I kind of bring it down to this simple. He told me one thing at a time. So if we could, there's a mom out there. There's a young girl out there that's lost everything, right? What would be the steps? Let's take them through baby steps. What would be the first thing that you would suggest they can do?
Just admit that you have a problem, because, well, most likely you have a problem. But my first step would be to look up detox centers, and if you have been in recovery before, call someone that is in recovery or has struggled in the past, or So that would be my first thing, is to start with detox, because detox gives you all the tools. Are you going to go to long-term treatment? Are you going to, how do you get into meetings? Or so it's either, for my first step would be detox or go to a AA or NA meeting and reach out to people.
So so that's the best thing. I like to say it like a friend of mine, Jack Maroney, who gave me this. He said this. He said when you get to he's in recovery. He's a writer, great guy. He said when you get to surrender, when you throw up your hands, it doesn't matter who you throw them up to. Whether it's Teen Challenge, this detox, or you can't have phones, this, whatever, you throw them up. You have to say, I'm done, right? That's the first step. So here
Yeah.
we have a long question, so bear with me. How did you make the decision to go to long-term treatment, and what would you tell others? I can't read the rest of that. But so let's take the first part. Tell others that are struggling with this decision. Kimberly, that's your friend Kimberly.
So
Kimberly,
yep.
no, Kimberly, right? Okay.
Yes.
So,
Yep.
go ahead. Sorry.
So what was the first part of the question?
How did you make the decision to go to long term? What was your kid, you lost her. What was that? How did you make the decision, and what would you tell others who are struggling with that?
So they have 30-day treatment centers as well as long-term treatment centers. And for me, being on methadone and then being addicted 3 years prior to that, so I was addicted for 3 years, got right on methadone and was in between methadone and Suboxone, and then I detoxed off everything. I just knew a 30-day treatment center would not be enough for me. And, being homeless and losing my kids and losing 70 pounds and just starting from nothing, like literally one outfit that I went into treatment with, and working my way up, I knew it was going to take time. And most treatments do. I don't, if I was to recommend treatment to anyone, I would recommend long term, because 30 days it's not enough to find yourself and find out, what your issues are inside.
So the best thing to do is to come to the decision: I surrender. I can't do this. I can't do it on my own. I'm a junkie. I'm addicted. I just can't do it. Detox number one, and then look for long term, a place like the W House that had 30, it had all different phases, right? So,
Exactly.
by how long were you in the W House?
I was in the W House for 90 days, I believe.
90 days. And then from there, where did you go?
I went home. The only reason I did go home and didn't go to another long term is because I had the opportunity to be back in my daughter's life and start working with my dad. And, I have a network of I have an amazing support system. So I just felt very comfortable this time going home. And it's not, I wasn't going from being on the streets to, I was actually going into a home. So I felt comfortable.
Right, but there are programs like the W. You could stay there for a long period of time, up to a year. You could move out,
Exactly.
right? And so that's the thing. I think what we're talking here, Britt, is that this is a long-term battle. This isn't like, I always like to tell someone the 12-month goal. Let's get
Exactly.
down. Let's get down 12 months, because I remember my sponsor said to me, how long you been living the way you have? And I said, well, 30 years. It's, how's that going for you? Well, not that good. Well, what about let someone else make your decisions for 12 months? If you don't, you heard me say this in the W House. So try it for 12 months. If you don't like it, the heroin's still back out in the street. I remember when my sponsor said that to me, I was like, did he just tell me that I could go back out in a year? But it made me look at things differently. And then, of course, we both know you get a year clean, you're feeling good. There's no way we want to go back to that hell.
Exactly.
Let's talk about the stigma of addiction. because that's really tough to get over. And I mean, it took some real courage for you to get here, to come here today. There are several people that, you know, have trouble going out there. Their parents don't want them to know they're a junkie. You know, but for you stepping up to the plate and coming here on television, putting yourself out there, it took great courage, but it also says that your heart is you want to help people. And so that stigma is pretty tough out there, don't you think?
Yep.
So talk about that stigma and how we can shatter. What I mean, as far as you said your mom and dad were acceptant, but while you were out there in the street, was it pretty bad with your family?
Oh yeah, it was before I came into recovery, my parents cut off communication with me. And I mean, my aunt sometimes would send me money for food, or, you know, if I text her and said I'm so hungry and, you know, yada yada, she would help me out. But I mean, the stigma of addiction, it's horrible. I had communication with no one. So
Do you think that did that stigma out there keep you out on the street longer?
yes, yep. No communication with my family, and, you know, not having communication with anyone. I didn't know who to go to for help. You know, I knew I could always call my family, but in the back of my head, I was thinking they had enough. You know, I've been going through this for years, and so when my family did open back up to me and, you know, help me, I can't tell you the feeling of knowing that being in recovery, my family would be there for me, and that
So
means the most to me.
so what can we do, me and you, as recovering people, and all of our friends, your friends that are watching here today? What can we do to help crack through that, to shatter that stigma? It's going to take some time, but you know, what are some of the things that we can do?
To break other people's stigmas,
Yeah,
or
you know, the stigma out there, because there's some poor junkie that might be listening to this that is cut off from the world, right, because of the stigma. And so there's no help for them at all. How can we, you know, I mean, okay, so what we just told addicts, struggling addicts, what they have to do first, right? Boom, boom, boom. You know, surrender, care, done. But the outside world is keeping a lot of these people in the dark, is not helping at all. That's just my thing, because we're junkies. We're no good. You know, the whole thing about harm reduction is we don't want them robbing people. We don't want them spreading disease. We don't want them doing, so I'm not, you know, it's very similar to the AIDS epidemic, wherein, hey, it was men having sex with men. If they want to do it, they want to die, that's God's will. So there was a stigma back there then. What can you and I do as recovering people that have been successful in recovery do to
I I
shatter that? Go ahead.
I believe that it's awareness. Awareness is what us recovering addicts can do to help. Because I mean, I know so many people, especially on social media. There's Shonda Lynn. I follow her page, and she, you know, has millions of viewers watching her stories and her poems. And, you know, she speaks on recovery and the opiate epidemic. And um, there's a guy, James Matthew, who does Ride for Recovery, and, you know, he's riding his bike all over the U.S. raising awareness for addiction. So um, you know, that was a big thing that gave me hope also when I was homeless. There's a nonprofit organization in Baltimore City called Angels of Addiction, and they helped me so much when I was homeless with, you know, if it was a sleeping bag or if it was raining and they saw me on the side of the road. They when I was homeless, end of or in beginning of 2016, or end of 2016, they at that time they would feed homeless people Monday, Wednesday, and Friday in Baltimore on the street. They would just go out. They're a nonprofit group and help people that are living on the street while they were raising awareness, you know, pushing recovery and telling people it's possible. And that's what gave me hope when I was homeless. So I think that raising awareness and, you know, pushing that because it is an epidemic, pushing recovery. And I feel like that's what we can do as recovering addicts.
Absolutely. I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. And part of the mission on the show, of course, is to raise awareness. That hopefully, that as we build, like you said, that young lady has 1 million people watching her. That if we get to that point, and that we can go on stream on live on phones all over, we're going to be having a big dent in that stigma. You know, if we can have people like you. See, the key though, the key for awareness, Brittany, is to have people like you step up to the plate, have the courage to go on television, to go on Facebook Live, YouTube Live, whatever it may be, and to say, hey, I'm a junkie, I'm in recovery, it is possible. I'm, you know, because did you think you were a bad person when you were out there?
Nope. Nope.
But did other people think you were a bad person?
Yep.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about your kids and how you handle that. Did you have to talk to them? Because the oldest were what age were they again?
9 and 10.
Okay, so tell me about that. Was it emotional?
I mean, it's emotional now because they have so many questions, because their father and their stepmom, told them she's on a heroin. You may never see her again. So, when they were littler, I would always tell them, well, when I was in treatment a couple years ago, I told them I was in school or I was sick and I was getting better. But it's becoming hard. And my 10-year-old, he questions it. He asked, why were you away? I do explain it to them, but there's only so much that you can explain for them to understand. But I feel like they're at the age now where it's getting easier for me to explain, whereas my 5-year-old, she wouldn't understand,
Right,
but
but
I will tell her.
you will tell her. Yeah. So your older kids, what were what was their biggest question to you? Like why you weren't there for them, or what was your biggest question that they had for you?
Why I left them. When I did relapse, their father wouldn't let me see him obviously, and I just stopped seeing him one day after having him, every other week or every weekend, or whenever I wanted him to go into school functions. And that was the biggest question: is why did you leave?
Yeah, and how did you answer?
Because I was sick. I tell him I was sick, and I had to get better. And I think one day, when I can explain it more, they'll understand. But
Yeah. So we just had another question come in, which is a great question, and it's something that people ask me all the time. Um, does tough love work with addicts? That comes from Sarah Dumont. Does tough love work with addicts? What do you think?
tough love, yes, I believe it does work. My my parents were very enabling at the beginning of my addiction, giving me money for gas. I had a gas card, helping me pay my car when this was in 2011, 2010. They were very enabling, giving me money whenever I wanted it. Um, just always there for me. But this last time in 2015, when they completely shut the door, I think they had me on like AAA and their cell phone plan. I was paying for the stuff, but they cut me off of it. They just turned their back on me. And I know it's hard for a lot of parents or loved ones to shut the door, because you're afraid, what's going to happen? What if they overdose, or what if they pass away? But you just can't think like that, because regardless, if you're enabling them, they could pass away, or if you're not, I just feel like it's the best thing to cut off, giving them money, give them food instead of money if they're hungry, or give them sleeping bags if it's cold. But that's how I feel. Do
That,
not enable.
that's
Tough love.
that I've told so many people throughout the years that, listen, they say, but Richie, but what if he die? I can't think of him out in the cold, dying on the street by himself. And I said, well, here's what's going to happen. You're going to go down in the basement, and you're going to open the door, and he's going to be dead on the floor. So you keep enabling your son or daughter because you don't want them to die in the streets, and they'll die in the comfort of your home where it's nice and warm. And people don't really get that, because they can't really conceive breaking it's their kid. When my mother said it was the toughest thing that she ever did, was to say, you got to get out of here, because, and I'll never forget, Britt, when my mom told me, go, she wouldn't let me in the door. Back then, bags cost $30. That's how old I am. And now you can get them for $7. But she told me, wouldn't open the door, the lock was changed, I couldn't get in, I couldn't, and I said, what the heck? And she said, came to the little glass, she said, if you don't leave, I'm calling the cops. I remember walking back into the city of Lowell. It was like, oh my God, my mother. And that was one of the key to saying, I got nobody. I'm on my own, zero. We got another question here from Nicole Willis. It says, I have 6 months starting to get difficult. How have you made it 15 months? So this young lady has, I think, Nicole, right? Nicole Willis, yeah. I have 6 months starting to get difficult. How have you made it 15 months?
Nicole, my suggestion would be to reach out to people in recovery. And if it's getting difficult, as in, you're having cravings, or I still even have dreams, drug dreams where I wake up and taste it. And, when I first got in recovery, I was watching intervention and, doing all kind of things that would trigger me. And I didn't know it at the time. Now, when I see interventional on TV, I have to flip through it because I don't want to watch that stuff and then have dreams, waking up tasting drugs, but it's still difficult being 15 months. I don't think, in rehab they said it could be 10 years, down the road until your dreams went away. So I just think it's mainly support, reaching out to people when I had cravings or I have bad days and find, out bad news, or like my grandfather's death anniversary. He died 2 years ago. On that day, it was really hard for me. And I have to reach out to people and talk to people. It's communication with a good network. And I'm always here if you want to send me a Facebook request, and,
Nice.
I can, yeah, I
Yeah,
can help support you.
the key, Nicole, and I'm sure this is what Britt is saying, is that you can't be silent. You can't keep this inside, because we all feel. I remember the dreams. I remember waking up in a sweat, thinking that I got high. The needle chasing me, and I thought, oh, I just got high, and I had to come to the reality. And yeah, I can taste it. You could taste it in your stomach, the feeling before, and you get all those for a long time. And a lot, I've always found, and this might be where we don't have Nicole with us to ask her, but I find that, Brittany, that a lot of the 6 months, and you can speak to this, the 6, 7 months in, the 8 months in, when we start getting a lot has to be mental. It's like, I screwed up so much. I hurt so many people. It was just so easy to go down that street and get a little bag and take away all my stuff, right? Don't you think it's mental, dealing with the thing? So how did you speak to that, and how did you overcome that type of, those type of thoughts?
I think it's mental, like you said, and I would reach out to people. I have a friend, her name is Kathy, and she's 5 years sober, and she's been a big help to me in my recovery. And again, the girls from the W House, just reaching out to people that have been there. And I have 15 months. I know people with longer sobriety who can help me get through that stuff. But I do think it's mental.
Yes, and it's when we keep, Nicole, from what I'm sure that Brittany's saying, when we keep all this pain silent, when we don't speak out about it, we are then going to be trapped into possibly getting high again. I had a good friend, real tough kid from Lowell, got clean, might have been 7 or 10 years, was up in Maine, became a pastor of a teen challenge, became a pastor of a church, drove to Lowell one day to see his family. They found him in a hotel dead on the ground after, 10 years maybe. So we are never, and I'm sure just because Brittany has 15 months or I have 30 years, doesn't mean that we beat anything. It's right, Brittany? It's one day at a time, don't you think?
One day at a time. Yes.
And
I
so what? Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say I know people that have had years clean and relapse. I could wake up tomorrow and get in a car accident and not be able to tell the doctor no when he prescribed, which I have done. I do all the time. I have to tell my doctors I'm in recovery, but something could happen and I could be feeling down and relapse. I have to work on just today and not tomorrow, or just this second, this moment today.
And there's times I remember, and maybe you can, that I had to think about just this moment, just get through this moment. Things were so the stress and anxiety. I don't know if you dealt with a lot of stress and anxiety in your recovery, but I had panic attacks galore, and to
Mhm.
overcome that and to sit there and not sleep right? Sleep is pretty bad, to stuff. It's tough, and I think that what you're saying here, that if we establish a network and we trust people, right? We got to trust other people with our story, and that's it. The thing that I wanted to talk about because I loved her so much was Liz. What do you think? I read her story recently again that I helped her with, and she shared that story in the group. She didn't want to put it up on the website. I understand, but what do you think the reason why, like you made it and she didn't?
I can't speak for Liz because I'm not sure at the time what was bothering her, or I didn't know that she had relapsed. But for me, it was holding on resentments and what I did when I was homeless, and telling someone that I trusted, and getting everything off of my shoulders. Whereas, I mean, when we were in treatment, she did open up, but there was things that only went so far. So that's the one thing I want to harp on in this video is, if you have things that are bothering you from active addiction, if you're still in active addiction and there's so much that you think you can't dig yourself out of it, you can, and there's people there to support you. You have to have support, and you have to be able to share and get the resentments, get them out, and start new again.
I so believe in what you just said, is that I believe after reading Monster, her story, is that she just could not get over where her addiction brought her. And instead of being able to just share it, instead of being able to just say, this happened to me, and I didn't want it to happen, but it did. I think as I wrote my book, I'm a heroin addict. There's stuff in there that I tell of family secrets that I never told anybody. They come out of my book. People, I'll never forget this, Brittany. I was with my wife. We're filming The Fighter, and I was late for a book signing at one of the big Barnes & Noble. And I go, all these people are there waiting for me. Those areas where they sell coffee, it's packed with people. And that's when I started to know that, wow, there's a big problem with these fathers coming up to me and mothers. But there was someone in the back row that they looked like I knew them from something, or they knew someone I wrote about, and they were upset with me. I could tell. But throughout my life, I've had a lot of people upset with me. One of the question and answers, they put up their hand and said, how could you write those things that you did? How could you write about? How could you tell them? And I'll never forget what I said. I just said, I understand that I might have upset people, but I look at it as that, how could I not tell them? Because by telling my story and all the bad things that I did as a heroin addict, an active addict, I released those ghosts. They're still there, don't get me wrong. They're still there. They still pound away at me. They still make me sad. They still make me like, what was that? What did I do? How did I screw up 30 years of my life? It's always going to be there. It's coming to the terms that life goes on, right? So now in your, I know you have 15 months, but let's talk a little bit about, someone just wrote in a thing that actually my mother, it's a comment from someone, there's no name here, but it might be my mother, watch. She's 83 years old, she's great, but she told me one time one of the first articles that was ever written on me, and it shared, because my father was this very well-known high school teacher in the community and big, big name. The Farrells were big names and all. And the first thing she said is, where it says here, we are only as sick as our secrets. A great saying, you know. We're only as sick as our secrets. So you would tell anybody, it's like my goal, one of my goals, Brett, is to get that seminar that I taught there to record it and to give it to recovery centers all over the country. You know, so the thing that I see, and I don't know you see in Baltimore, and I know we've got a long way to go to overcome this death that keeps rising. They say 70,000 plus last year. They haven't have a final count yet. They say that Harvard study said in the next 10 years, it could be up to 650 to 700,000 in 10 years. That's like losing a Vietnam War. You're too young to remember the Vietnam War, but we lost about 56,000 kids there, you know, young people. We're going to lose a Vietnam, and that was almost 20 years. We're going to lose a Vietnam War every year for the next 10 years, this epidemic. Now, if that was a virus or Ebola or something, we would spend thousands of dollars to bring it down. But because we're looking at this stigma, it's a giant, someone puts a needle in their arm, hey, we're not going to spend money. We're not going to get them rehab, right? So I think that some of the things we have to do is look at some other things. Now, I want to talk about this quickly. I don't know how you feel about Vivitrol. Vivitrol, to me, I think it's a really good, alternative. Naltrexone. It's basically Narcan, which is saving people's lives, right? It's basically Narcan. Only Narcan is short lasting. It brings you back to life, and then it goes within 24 or 48 hours. Where Vivitrol or Naltrexone is a 30-day thing. Now, how do you feel about? It's the only drug that's not an opioid agonist. It's not an opioid. You know what I'm saying by that? Yeah.
Yes. So, I don't know too much about the Vivitrol. It sounds great. I knew a girl who went to the W House. We all knew her. And she was on Vivitrol, and she went out on a pass and used and didn't feel anything, and used, didn't feel anything, used again. She kept using. So, when all of that heroin hit her, she overdosed and passed away, because it does block it. So, I don't know how I feel on the Vivitrol shot, but it's great because it's like you said, non-addicting. I don't think there's any withdrawal symptoms since it's just the naltrexone. So, I would recommend it if it's working for people. I just had mixed feelings again because of the maintenance. I would never get on it because I think that with abstinence and support and, I feel like I can handle not being on it, not being on anything, but that's just my recovery. But everyone knows their own recovery.
Yeah. So, but there's a theory out there, and there's this great guy that I'm going to speak to next week from the St. Louis area. When I did this story on these 5 kids that were on Vivitrol from the Huffington Post, and they the powers to be didn't like the story. They almost fired the 5 kids that work in this program because they talked to the press. Because their thing is harm reduction, which is opioid agonist, which an opioid agonist, to explain that people don't know, an agonist is an opioid, like heroin. So Suboxone has a little piece of opioid in there. So if I brought this into the studio and gave Suboxone to everybody, they'd get high, right? Everybody would get a little buzz. Methadone, you get really high, okay? This naltrexone blocks that. There's a door back there that the opioid attaches itself to. Well, it covers it. And yes, you're exactly right, right? If people want to get high, they're going to keep shooting over it, right? So all of a sudden when it hits them, they're going to die. But those, you know, those people that are on Suboxone get high too. They boost it, they take stuff, right? And the same thing with methadone. You boost it, you take things and over. But we just had a comment. We're coming down. This has been a remarkable hour, but we had a comment from Dawn Zinn that says family and friends need to understand recovery is a process that goes on long after detox and treatment, right? So talk a little bit about that.
Exactly. You can go to detox and go to treatment and get all the tools that you need and learn as much as you can and just be like a big book bag of information. But unless when you get out of treatment or when you stay in treatment and go to the next phase or however you do your recovery, you have to know that you have to apply the tools that you learn that you did not have before. For example, for if you relapsed, you did not have the tools to be able to say no or, call someone when you were feeling down or going through something. You just have to apply the tools that you learn in treatment and apply them daily in your recovery, as well as build a network of support. And, you have to, I feel like yeah.
Yeah, so I hate to, this hour has gone by. I had 45 seconds left. I just want to wrap this up. To thank you for your courage and the bravery you have to come here. Continue. I look forward to working with you in Maryland to build this so that next year we're on this show and we have like so many people that watch us all the time. We'd like to have the show on every single day with content from every single state, completely free to the addict, from courageous people like you. That basically, Britt, we're here to save lives. And you can do it. I got 9 seconds left. I love you, kid. Thank you. We'll talk. You can do it. You people out there, you can do it too. Thank you.
Well,